Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. To get us started,
Good afternoon.
let me introduce Doug O'Brien, who is the president and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association. Doug, please take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, John. Thanks for joining us today. I am Doug O'Brien. I'm the president and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. I'm happy to be co-hosting this webinar with Chuck Connor, the CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives. This webinar provides us an opportunity to hear directly from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on the new program they've rolled out following the implementation of the CARES Act. I want to take a quick minute to thank everyone in the cooperative community, those essential workers, likely including many of you on the call today, whether that's agriculture co-ops, food co-ops, home care, credit unions, and rural electric co-ops. We hope that you and your loved ones are all healthy as we continue to navigate the impacts of COVID-19. I will just mention that it has been and continues to be a priority for NCBA CLUSA to work with the broader cooperative community, certainly including NCFC, to make sure that as many cooperatives as possible are eligible and have access to programs related to the economic consequences of COVID-19. NCBA CLUSA has been successful in including language in the CARES Act to ensure that all cooperative businesses with 500 or fewer employees are eligible for SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, direct loans from Treasury, of course. And we continue to expand eligibility through the regulatory process for co-op businesses under the Paycheck Protection Program. And on implementation, I want to sincerely thank the staff at USDA, including Deputy Undersecretary Brand, Acting Administrator Brodziski, their teams, as well as Secretary Perdue's policy team, especially for their support for cooperative businesses during the rollout of the Small Business Administration PPP. Many of you know co-ops have long had challenges working with SBA because of some of their requirements on financing that do not allow for co-ops to participate. And during this rollout, the team at USDA was quick to act when we raised concerns and provided support to SBA staff to ensure guarantees were processed. These funds were critical to co-ops in all sectors, and we greatly appreciate to have their support as our co-ops fight through the impacts of COVID-19. We expect more legislation to come as our businesses and communities continue to weather the recover from the economic consequence of COVID-19. We'll be advocating for co-ops to be used as a tool across sectors and geographies to help our economy recover. I'm going to turn this over to Chuck Connor in just 1 minute. I want to cover just a couple basic housekeeping matters here. This webinar is recorded and will be available to be viewed again as a resource in a day or so on our website, and I'm sure NCFC will have that link. To find the video and other resources to help you navigate federal programs in response to COVID-19, you can visit NCBA CLUSA's COVID-19 resource website. NCFC has a similar resource page, both great resources for co-ops in the co-op community. Attendees are in listen-only mode, but there will be a time for questions and answers following today's presentation. If you're viewing on a computer, simply type your question onto the chat box at any time during the webinar. The team that we have supporting us today will share those questions with me, and I'll pose them to the panelists to respond. So if you're participating by phone, you can email a question to info@ncba.coop. So again, put your question in the chat box if you're on the internet. If you are on phone, if you have a question, at info@ncba.coop. Now we'll get to as many questions as we can, but if we don't get to everything, NCFC and NCBA CLUSA will work with USDA to get a response to anyone we missed during that presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Chuck Connor. And again, thank you so much, Chuck, for teaming up on this webinar and for being such a great partner in advocating for co-ops during this and at all times. So Chuck, please.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug. I hope everybody can hear me okay. It is quite an honor for me to join Doug and the folks at NCBA CLUSA in a joint effort. And I will just tell you that this is something we need to do more and more of, as we're all sort of working in the direction of helping cooperatives and helping our members. And I'm just delighted again to have the opportunity to do a lot of collaborative work. You guys have heard me say many, many times that our voice is very small when we speak with many, many voices in sort of different directions. But when we put our voices together, we can have a tremendous impact. And there's been no better demonstration of that than the impact that we have had over the last couple of months relative to eligibility and participation in a lot of the programs that the government has been offering to try and assist farmers and co-ops and agribusinesses to get through what we all acknowledge is perhaps the most difficult time in a generation for all of us. And that is not an overstatement, certainly. We just, see this as an opportunity for you to be educated on the many programs that the government is offering out there, the ones that are going to be described today, the B&I program in particular. For many of you, this may not be the exact fit, but it's been Doug and I's goal from the beginning just to make sure that you are fully educated on the entire basket of tools that have been in the toolbox for you to try and sustain your operations and your farmers and your members through, again, what are very, very difficult times that have no indication of being lightening up anytime soon. And so there's going to be a lot of additional activity. This probably will not be the last webinar. It will not be the last thing that will get thrown in the toolbox to try and sustain you through this. But again, it's a big enough one, and with the great help of USDA, and they have been great partners with us in trying to educate you and help you sustain yourselves through all of this. We just believe that this is a program that you need to consider. And again, lots of rule changes. I know for my members, B&I program has not been a great program for them in the past, but stay tuned here because we're going to learn about some things. And for some of you, this might be the right tool in the toolbox to help you. So again, thank you all for joining. Thanks to Doug and his team for really carrying the bulk of the load in organizing this. And we're just real honored to be a co-partner in this and what may be more to come.
Thank you, Chuck, and absolutely a lot more work to do that we can work together as a full cooperative community. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and we know we can be more effective on behalf of all of our members as we work together. So really appreciate that. So I want to introduce Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development, Bette Brand. Now I know Bette was. She had to join a couple minutes late because she was on a call with her leadership there at USDA. So hopefully Bette will join us. I'll just say, because I want to hand it off very quickly, that Bette's been such a fantastic champion for rural America and for cooperatives as well. Bette's got an open door. She has been since she's been there at the department, and had always been a great person to help solve problems with, and a great champion for us within USDA and beyond within the federal government. So I'm going to hand this off to Bette, and if Bette is not able to be there, it's going to be with Mark Brodziski. So Bette or Mark, please take it away. And Mark, I think you might be, there you go.
There you go. Okay. So
all right.
Yeah, let's try, see if I can get all my devices here to work at the same time. Thank you. Thank you,
All right,
Chuck.
we can see it.
Yes, thank you, Doug. Chuck, we're definitely interested and glad to have the ability to check in with your members with NCBA, with NCFC, here with USDA. As you noted, Bette is definitely interested in connecting and communicating with you this afternoon. She is definitely a strong supporter of not just co-ops in rural, but agriculture in our rural communities. She will be connecting as soon as she can this afternoon with, I think, a little bit more of an appropriate welcome message and a little bit of a background within activities within USDA. But while we're waiting for her, what I thought I'd do is just dive quickly just into our program to talk a little bit about on our business programs, the new program we're rolling out to assist our rural businesses in recovery from the pandemic. We're referring to this as the Business and Industry CARES Act program because it's built on the Business and Industry program itself, but it is really operating as a separate program. I have a little bit of a slide deck I'll go through, and I don't know if we covered logistics of how to advance slides. Are you guys advancing slides as we go along, or do I need to do that?
Yeah, I am.
We'll advance them for you, Mark.
All right.
When you want to advance, just say next slide.
Okay, we should have an agenda that we can walk through real quick. Can you flip to that? It's like third slide maybe in, third or fourth one after Betty's slide. Yeah, there we go. So I thought I'd do is just touch base very quickly on what we refer to as our standard B&I program. Again, the second point of our agenda and the main focus will be on the B&I CARES Act program, but that is built on the B&I program itself. So understanding the foundation and a little bit of the differences in the two rolling forward is where we'll spend our time this afternoon and rolling through some highlights. We'll spend a couple minutes on talk about the application process, but the B&I program is a guaranteed loan program. So the application process is really with a commercial lender, and the lender is the applicant to USDA. So the lender really needs to understand the process, I think, more than our local business or the co-op, but we're glad to share that with you. And we'll touch base a little bit on some of the resources available for a little bit more program information or other resources within USDA that you may have an interest in. Okay. Why don't we flip to the next slide, please? So first, the Business and Industry program is a long-term program. It's been now in existence for almost 50 years. The core of the program is really, again, a guaranteed loan made by commercial lenders to rural businesses. Generally, the loan is for a longer term type loan. So it could be real estate improvements, equipment, could be for a business purchase, a new business startup, a business expansion, refinancing of activities. But generally, the program assists longer term loans. The most significant difference between the standard B&I program and what we're introducing today is the B&I CARES Act program really are the use of the loan funds. The B&I CARES Act program is intended to focus on helping rural businesses recover from the pandemic, and we're doing that by providing and using loan funds for working capital purposes. So a very targeted purpose of loan funds for working capital. Businesses that could use some assistance broader than that, more of the traditional programs or traditional use of the B&I funds, still have access to our B&I program. So as I walk through the program today, we'll talk about the both a little bit as to when the standard B&I program maybe is more appropriate, but also how the B&I CARES Act program can help supplement with working capital loans going forward. Okay, next slide. Both programs really are built on the standard of the types of businesses or borrowers that are eligible for the program. This is just a simple listing of the types of and structures of businesses. Could be a for-profit, a nonprofit. Obviously, cooperatives definitely are eligible. Indian tribes, enterprises operated by tribes, and even public entities that operate an enterprise could be eligible for the program. A for-profit could be a sole proprietorship, or it could be any legal business structure on a for-profit basis. And the next slide, please. So, and as I noted, it's a guaranteed loan program through commercial lenders. So the lenders that are automatically eligible for the program include our federal and state chartered banks, savings loans, all the farm credit system, banks and the institutions under the farm credit, and credit unions are all eligible lenders. And by eligible, we mean that they really don't have to go through an application process. They simply work with a business that's interested in a loan guarantee and submit applications to our agency. We do have ability to work with non-bank lenders. Those types of lenders, basically a non-depository lender, would need to go through an application process to demonstrate their qualifications for lending before they become a lender within the program. But again, under the standard B&I program and under the CARES Act program, basically the same lenders are eligible and can participate in either side of the program. Okay, next slide. So I thought I'd dive a little bit more of the details of the actual B&I CARES Act program itself. So next slide. The program was funded by the CARES Act, so in early March. It provided about $20 million in budget authority to support about $1 billion in program level. Mainly we're able, basically what the budget authority does, it in essence supports the cost of the guarantees. As we roll forward, we work with the Office of Management and Budget on a subsidy calculation to really support or calculate the program level. And we're, with this announcement, announcing is just short of $1 billion that's available for loans under the B&I CARES Act. The program itself, according to the CARES Act, is open through the end of September of 2021, but the funds will be available until they're expended. If they're not expended, in an aggressive manner, then the program will run as late as the end of September in 2021. We announced both a rule and a notice. The notice really opens up application process, and the rule are basically the guidelines, the regulations that we wrote to set the requirements of the program, the provisions of the program, basically as add-ons onto the B&I program. And I'll walk through kind of the highlights of what those are here as we roll forward. Okay, the next slide. So this slide basically focuses on about 7 areas that are significant change between the regular or the standard B&I program and the B&I CARES Act program. Again, probably the most significant change is the focus of the use of loan funds for working capital purposes only. So a business can use working capital basically for any operating expense, along with principal and interest payments on any outstanding loans rolling forward. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of eligibility and how that works. The guarantee itself, the guarantee that we offer to the bank or to the commercial lender is a guarantee of 90% of the loan. And then we have a little bit of a fee structure that I'll roll through. There are 2 different fees. One is a guarantee fee that's really paid at the time that we're issuing the guarantee. We expanded the program for some new purposes, and this is a major expansion to include ag production. So ag producers are always eligible for the B&I program, even the standard program, but the use of loan funds under the standard program was limited as to how much could be used for ag production and the amount of loan funds that could be used for other purposes like processing or other business structures kind of related to ag but not directly related to ag production. Under the B&I CARES Act program, ag production as a sole purpose is eligible for the program, and we'll go into a little bit of detail on that. We're extending the repayment terms for working capital loans. As I noted earlier, generally the regular B&I program is for longer term financing. On our regular program, working capital loans are set up on a 7-year, not to exceed a 7-year repayment term. Under the B&I CARES Act program, we're extending that to up to 10 years. We're also enabling lenders to defer principal payments for up to 3 years. So it could be a principal deferment of 3 years and then a repayment period of 7 years after that 3-year period. We modified a little bit of our eligibility requirements, the general requirements around equity requirements for businesses. I'll talk about that just briefly. Expanded or I should say, provide a little bit more flexibility in the analysis of collateral. Generally, we would not be able to lend up to the full value of collateral, but under the B&I program, we're extending it to do so. So basically, we have to show that a loan is secured, but it could be, the collateral could be equal to up to the loan amount. And last, we're extending the maximum loan levels up to the statutory limit of $25 million across all cases. Under our standard program, we have certain conditions that a business would have to meet to qualify for loans over 10 million. But under the B&I CARES Act program, those conditions are waived and we can look at a loan up to 25 million total maximum. Okay, I'll go into a little bit of detail as we roll forward. So the next slide, please. Again, I mentioned the guarantee percentage is 90% for all loans. There is a 2% guarantee fee. So this is a fee that the lender would pay at the time we issue the guarantee. Now that fee could be charged onto the borrower, could be loan funds that pay that fee, but it is a standard fee for each loan. And then the program also has a renewal fee. So each year, the unpaid principal balance, so based on the unpaid principal balance, there's a 0.5% renewal fee charged to the loan. Okay, next slide, please. The B&I CARES Act program is available to the same borrowers that are available under the B&I program. We haven't made changes there, but as I noted, we expanded.
Hey, Mark, this is sorry to interrupt here. This is Doug O'Brien, but I'm seeing Betty Brand is on, and I think you're unmuted now, Betty.
I am. I can speak at the end, but I don't want to stop Mark's momentum. I just am really glad I could join you all. I can just say a few words towards the end and before we take questions. How about that?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, glad that you could join. Yes, and I'll just kind of highlights again throughout the program. So the B&I's program, the CARES Act program, is available to our standard B&I borrowers, as I mentioned earlier, with the expansion of ag producers. So ag production is a eligible purpose for the B&I CARES Act program. We do test, though, look at that the borrower, the business, had to have been in operation on February 15 of 2020. So that's a little bit of a twist compared to our standard program. Our standard program, we could finance new businesses or business startups, but the B&I CARES Act program is only available to businesses that were in operation on February 15. Okay, the next slide, please. And the next couple of slides kind of roll through when we say working capital as to what we mean by and the use of those loan funds. But generally, the CARES Act required that the loan funds be used really to prepare and respond to the pandemic. So we felt that the best use of loan funds from a business perspective is being able to help with working capital, kind of reestablish the operating needs of a company and of a business rolling forward. So that's when we're focusing on working capital only. Now, on the ag production side, we also are looking at other opportunities within federal services, federal government. As many of the producers know, the Farm Service Administration also has a guaranteed loan program. So producers that can qualify for and whose loan needs could be met by FSA would have to go that route. But for ag producers that either are not eligible for FSA or that they need a loan that is larger than what FSA could provide, those are the types and sizes of deals that the B&I CARES Act program could serve. So it's really a test of eligibility for FSA loans that ag producers would have to meet to qualify for the B&I CARES Act program. Okay, next slide. And just a quick run through as to the working capital with types of services or expenses that could be covered. And it's good that generally operating expenses, administrative expenses, supplies, inventory, materials that a business, an ag producer would utilize during the operating year would not include any capitalized items. In other words, not equipment, not livestock for breeding stock, or other long-term purchases, but it would be generally the operating type expenses, along with, as the fourth bullet here in this slide shows, along with principal and interest payments on existing loans. So even loans that some businesses were able to defer during the pandemic, so those payments could be made if they become due, as they become due, I should say, with the principal or with proceeds from the B&I CARES Act program. Okay, next slide. Again, ag production expenses could be eligible, and along with other expenses, either normal operating expenses or any additional expenses that a business faces due to the pandemic. So if there are other supplies, other equipment, not just say equipment, other supplies and costs that a business would occur that they normally would not occur, but they have because of the pandemic, those also would be eligible for the use of the B&I CARES Act loan funds. Okay, next slide. Just a quick highlight as to again, the standard B&I program could finance some of the activities that are showing on this slide and the next, but these are ineligible purposes under the B&I CARES Act program. And again, if a business was interested in or needed financing under these categories, we still could do so under the standard B&I program. And we'll talk a little bit at the very end as to it's also possible for business to apply for both at the same time. Apply for a B&I CARES Act loan for working capital and a standard B&I program, either for equipment, other refinancing, or other activities that the standard program could fulfill. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Maximum loan amounts, there are a couple of tests that we need to look at. As I noted earlier, kind of the upper limit of a maximum loan is $25 million. But we also need to look at the amount of funding that the business needs really to reestablish themselves, really to resolve the issues from the pandemic. And that would also set a maximum loan that they would be eligible for under the B&I CARES Act program. So just a little bit of highlight on that. I'll flip to the next slide, please. So the maximum loan offense of looking at operational needs would be basically the standard working capital purposes of that business on a typical month. So an average month, last 12 months, is how we would establish the maximum loan amount. So it would be again, looking at all the eligible purposes. So operating expenses, principal and interest payments, less any other assistance that the business received from either federal emergency programs or other assistance would be netted off. And that calculation would establish the cap as far as the maximum loan amount. We would then ask the borrower to work with the lender to look at basic cash flow needs. So the second bullet on here, so I should say the first bullet is really setting the maximum. The second bullet is really establishing the actual need. So the actual need is in essence the cash shortage, looking at cash flow projections from month to month until that business is up and running and sustainable again. So whereas the first bullet here talks about 12 months, that's to set the maximum limit. The second bullet, we're looking at need, does not have a timeline to it. It could be 3 months, 4 months, could be 12, could be longer. It could be a year and a half if that's what the business needed to reestablish themselves and draw on the working capital loan from the B&I CARES Act program. Okay, next slide. And this just runs through an example of how that loan amount would be set. Again, this is a calculation of the maximum loan amount. So in this example, we just assumed that over a year, this business would have had approximately $950,000 of 1.2 million of eligible costs. So the total loan amounts, if they would have received a PPP loan of $250,000, the difference of that, the $950,000, would be the amount they could be eligible for under the B&I CARES Act program. Okay. Next slide. Again, looking at some of the highlights of repayment terms and how that loan is structured. We're requiring lenders to basically fund the loan in multiple draws. And by that, we mean that if a business, if they needed all the funds on the day that the loan is originated, they could draw the funds. But in most cases, working capital is needed over time. So basically, the business would draw funds on a monthly basis as they need them, so on a multiple draws. The repayment of that loan would be set up as to a maximum of 10 years from the date of origination. They could have up to a year of interest deferral, principal and interest deferral, and then an additional 2 years of principal deferral, making interest payments over that time period. Now, if need be, some of that interest payment could use actual loan funds to help with that. Of course, also using loan funds to make principal interest payments on other loans. Again, the deferral on payment on this loan could be up to 3 years for principal payments, with the maximum term of the working capital loan being 10 years from the date of origination. Okay, next slide. We do have a equity requirement for basically a basic eligibility of a business to qualify for the B&I program. Under the B&I CARES Act, we provided 3 different options. So a business or a loan applicant would have to meet one of these three, not each of the three, but one of the three. Either their balance sheet would have to show that they have a 10% equity on the balance sheet, or if they don't meet that test, they would have to show that over time they've invested 10% or more of their fixed assets as owner contributed capital. Or the third option would be looking at their working capital needs, in other words, what they're borrowing, the purposes they're borrowing the loan funds, that at least 10% or more are coming from other sources. So again, this could be other loans or other sources. It could be income. That over the term of drawing the working capital loan, that the business is earning income and can cover at least 10% of their working capital costs from their income costs of income received. So again, the business will have to meet one of these three requirements. Okay, next please. All right, that's basically the highlights of the overview of the provisions of the program. Just a couple quick insights into the application itself. If you want to go to the next slide. We have a field office structure, so the rural development has a field office structure. This program, along with our business and industry program, is processed at our state office level. So I'll have a link here shortly as to, if you're not familiar with our rural development field office structure, of how to find an office that's closest to you. So each of the offices in the field would be receiving and processing applications. All our state offices have loan approval authority. All have authority of at least $5 million, and some, depending on their experience and type of portfolio they have authority up to $10 million in loan approvals. So we can handle, we foresee that most of the loans will be processed at the authority of our state level going forward. The funding itself is maintained here at the national level. In some of our programs, we're able to allocate funds to our state rural development office, basically give them the control of the funds. But because of the structure of this program, we couldn't do that. But we are developing a system in place that as applications are being approved at the state level, we'll have funds available and allocated to the state on a project by project basis for continuation or processing that application. Applications will be reviewed and approved in order received. And again, we're developing some administrative oversight from a national level to assure that we're able to do so. If as program funds are being utilized, that there's more demand than funds available, at that point we'll be going into a priority basis. So initially applications will be considered in order they're received, but once funds become more restricted, then we have a priority scoring process that we'll go through basically to wrap up the program once we get to that point. Okay, next slide. As far as adding in ag production, again, ag production is not traditional within the B&I program. We initially are setting up a limit of 50% of the funds being available for ag production. However, we're going to monitor that and establish or revise, adjust, that limit as we may need to. So if there is more demand from ag producers and ag production, then for the 50% of the funds, we will look at raising that limit to enable serving basically where the greatest need and greatest demand is for the funding. If we would do that, we'll publish basically a notice for the public as we realign kind of that reserve of funds for ag production. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned earlier, both programs, the CARES Act program and the B&I program, are available, and we are able to accept and process applications, basically a joint application, combining the two, rolling forward. Basically, it's the same process, our same processing team would do so. So it would really be a seamless process. The only catch to it is I just went through some of the revisions and some of the flexibility for the B&I CARES Act program. That flexibility does not apply to the other purposes of the B&I program. So for example, an ag producer could seek a loan for B&I CARES Act, 100% of the loan for ag production, but for the standard program, we couldn't do that. Under the standard program, the ag production piece cannot exceed 50% of the loan. The other 50% or more would have to be used for processing or other business activities other than ag production. Okay, next slide, please. And then if you're interested in a little bit more follow-up, obviously we're always available along with our field office structure, but some links and contact information. The regulations and the notice were published in the Federal Register. These are the links to access that. But more so, the last bullet on here, our website, is a program page that we stood up just for the B&I CARES Act program. It has the overview, basically what I just went through, but in a little bit of a narrative format. Along with additional information as to how to apply for the program, other resources available. As we carry out these types of webinars and activities, we also will be posting some of these to the website, so others have a chance to kind of listen to some of the pre-recorded program activities. And the next slide, please. And for our state office contacts, this website will give you a listing of all our states. Each of the state offices has their own webpage set up, and that webpage typically would list all the contacts. Really what you're looking for are either the state director or our business office rolling forward. If that still leaves you with some questions as to how to contact somebody or how to go forward, feel free to reach out to us. Within our programs, the two individuals that are really taking the lead on processing these are listed here. So Aaron Morris is our director of our processing division. So basically this is the division that'll be reviewing, working with the larger loan requests. And David Chestnut has been key to helping us write the program regulations and guidance going forward. And we are all available to help with any questions or any information that we can share kind of rolling forward. Okay, with that, I think that was my quick breeze and run through. So we'll turn it back to you, Doug, and for Betty, and roll from there. Okay, thank you.
And Mark, thanks so much for all that great information on what is really a unique program, and I think a great complement to the support that rural businesses and ag producers need today. I do want to hand it right off to Betty Brand on behalf of Chuck Connor, who's also on this call, Betty, and NCFC. But thanks so much for being part of this call today and for all the work that you and your team are doing to support rural businesses and farmers. So Betty, to you.
Yes, well, thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug and Chuck, both of you for having me on the call today. I apologize for being tardy. I was tied up with the Debt Secretary and was trying to get back here as quickly as possible. But I'm glad you were in very capable hands with Mark and the discussion of the meeting. And that's really what's important. But I do want to share with you that cooperatives truly are a part of the rural development family. We don't call it Rural Business Cooperative Service for nothing. I think the cooperatives are crucial to our rural businesses and producers and just their ability to be successful, and also to make sure everyone is aware of this program and that they have access to it. And your guidance and making sure your members know about it is so very important to the success of this program. As Secretary Perdue said in his announcement recently, that providing this much needed capital in these unprecedented times is the cornerstone of our commitment to all aspects of the rural economy. So on behalf of rural development, I want you all to know that we are working tirelessly beside you to put this critical funding to work as soon as possible. And we know how much our communities need it. We also know that this is a very challenging time for our country, and your federal government has taken unprecedented steps to help Americans through this economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. The CARES Act did not forget rural America, and I commend Congress for channeling this support through our office, and it's what we're made to do. So thank you so much for having us here, and I want to make sure we save time for questions in case there are any. We want to make sure everyone understands and has their questions answered. So thank you so much, and I commend Mark and the team and Rural Business Cooperative Service for the work that they have done on getting this program stood up so quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks for those comments. And certainly, I join you. I know Chuck does too. The team at USDA for standing up this program. As Mark through this, we see that it really is sort of a unique set of rules and regulation that adds very significant flexibility to this guarantee program, kind of the anchor guarantee program at our BCS. And so I think it was so important for everyone on the call today just to be able to hear straight from USDA on the, on this new program. So I have a few questions for Mark and Betty, and I want to, before I ask a couple that we've already got teed up, I want to remind everybody that if you're on the computer, please use your chat box to ask any question that you'd like. And then that will come to me, and then I'll be able to ask Betty and Mark those questions. If you're not on the computer, go ahead and email info@ncba.coop, info@ncba.coop, and I'll be able to see those questions too. So the first question I have, I got to look at my contraption here, my machine. This is a good question, Betty and Mark, and what is the definition of rural for purposes of this program?
Always a good question, right?
One of my favorite questions.
Yes, and we say that because for those of you that know rural development, know that different programs have different definitions, unfortunately. Basically for all our business programs, including the BNI CARES Act program, rural, it means, let's say what's not rural, is a city of 50,000 or more, the core city, and then the urbanized area contiguous to that city. So a city of 50,000 or more is not rural, and the urbanized area contiguous to that city is not rural. The website that I showed you, as far as any of the websites with the RD, have a large button towards the bottom of them that talks about eligibility. So we have an ability to map eligible areas. So simply with an address, just select one of the business programs, the BNI business program as your program, and then just type in an address, and that will then validate if the address is in a rural or not in a rural area. So that's one great way of checking. In addition to rural, some ag processing, so local regional food processing located in an urban area could also be eligible for the BNI and the BNI CARES Act program, as long as they're processing basically food that's produced, ag commodities that are produced locally and regionally, so within 400 miles. So generally it has to be a business located in a rural area, but there are some exceptions for food processing in urban areas.
All right, well, very good. Thank you, Mark. The next question has to do with the types of activities that are eligible. And I'm going to ask it in the question in kind of in a particular, and then just ask you to comment more generally. So the particular question is, are hemp processing operations eligible for the program? And then maybe just expand that more generally. Are there other restrictions, other types of businesses that that this audience might want to consider, but particularly for hemp processing operations?
Yes, so the type of business that's eligible, generally any business structure in a rural community is eligible. We do have a few exceptions. Golf courses are one of the exceptions. Charitable institutions are not eligible either. But as it relates to hemp or other products, ag commodities that are raised, grown under basically it's either a state or federal license would be eligible. So something like a marijuana distribution would not be eligible, being that you cannot license under federal. But hemp, as long as it's under a state or federal plan, yes, could be eligible. But it would have to be under an approved plan under the 2018 Farm Bill provisions.
Very good. Thanks, Mark. So here's another question. And just a reminder to our audience, please use the chat box if you have a question, or email info@ncba.coop. But otherwise, just go ahead and use the chat box if you're on the webinar. So a question on which lenders are able to process this the loan applications. And And I know you mentioned real clearly, most people probably know, but some might not, that you know, as a guaranteed loan program, the entity that the business or the farmer would deal with is a financial institution. How does a business or a farmer know that this financial institution works with BNI, or how can they kind of make sure that that institution has the right information to be able to to interact with USDA?
So right, yeah. So any federal or state chartered bank, farm credit, or a credit union could be and are eligible lenders under both the BNI program and the BNI CARES Act program. That doesn't mean that they are active in the program. Lenders that are obviously are quite familiar on how to proceed. Lenders that are not engaged in our BNI program is really one of the core strengths of our field office structure. Our field office teams are able to work with lenders, help them engage in the program, help them through the process. We highly encourage a lender that's not engaged in the program, simply as if they're interested, is simply to reach out to our field office contacts or to reach out to us. And we'll be glad to walk them through kind of the requirements of how to submit an application. Our application requirements are actually built on what a lender you would normally require in an application. So the lender still would go through their standard practices of receiving information, of processing an application. And then we have our application form that we simply put on top of that. And then the lender submits that package to us. Under the ag production, we also are able, now with the BNI CARES Act program, to accept basically a package as FSA normally would. So if the lender is familiar with the FSA guarantees, they should be able to kind of manage their way through with the BNI program without much difficulty, because mainly we're using the same process and same procedures going forward, the same record types of information. But there again, if a lender is interested in the program, needs a little bit of assistance, that's what our field office structure is there to help out, and we're glad to do so. We highly encourage businesses to work with lenders that know them, and let us work with bring the lender into our BNI program, rather than trying to find a lender that knows the program and switch lenders. I think that a business working with lenders that they know best is probably their advantage, and we'll be glad to help that lender through the process.
That makes a lot of sense. That's good advice, Mark. So it looks like we've cleared the questions, at least for now. I remind folks to use the chat box if you have a question. Email info@ncba.coop. And I'll just mention, if somehow a question comes in late, we'll make sure to get this to USDA. And I know USDA, with that plethora of links that Mark provided, that you can reach out to them directly for any questions. So with that, I think I'll ask, I think Bette, you're still on, but I think we've been able to complete this webinar, which I'm so glad, and I'm going to speak for Chuck Connor here too, so glad that we're able to do it, because this really is a unique program with some new eligibility opportunities for agriculture operations, as well as some new flexibilities that are really important for businesses and farmers and the financial institutions to understand. So thanks for taking the time to talk to our members at NCFC and NCBA CLUSA. Bette, I'll just ask, do you have anything else to add? Or Chuck?
This is Bette here, and it's really great that you all invited us to be able to participate today, both the cooperative organizations together. We have enjoyed a long history with you all and want to continue to look for opportunities to work together and to help our cooperatives and our rural businesses and rural producers. So thank you very much for the opportunity today. We are excited about this program, and we really feel that it will help our rural communities, which is so desperately needed right now.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Thank you again, Bette, and thanks to your team there at USDA. And I'll ask Chuck, do you have a final word?
So Doug, again, thanks for your team and all the organizational work they did in pulling this together. Like you, this is having now listened to all the details of the new BNI program, and obviously it is very different than anything we have seen in the past, and so with that requires analysis, and again I commend RD for not only educating us here, but how quickly they've gotten another brand new program on the ground and operational. And each one of these things are coming out in record speed, and that doesn't occur easily in a place like the Department of Agriculture. So we commend them. To all that are on the call and all that you interact with, take a look at this. And again, we've described this as a tool in the toolkit. And if this is a tool for you, we encourage you to reach out. And we're here. And certainly I know RD is there to help you make this work and to carry you through this tough time.
And thank you, Chuck. Thanks for teaming up on this webinar. Again, this webinar was recorded. It will be posted in about a day or two. You'll certainly be able to access that both at NCBA CLUSA and NCFC. And if there are more questions, feel free to use the channels we provided today or reach out directly to USDA. So with that, thanks everybody for taking the time. I hope everybody is safe and healthy, and have a good day.
Thanks, Doug.
Right. Thank you both. Yep.